The political panel All-Stars up shortly, Whānau, but first this week's 1-on-1 in 10 with Leader of the Labour Party, live from Waitangi, Chris Hipkins. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Well, kia ora, Bomber. Great to talk to you and greetings from Waitangi.
Chris, we want to dive straight into things. Last year, the Prime Minister promised us growth, growth, growth. And the only things that grew were unemployment, inflation, people leaving New Zealand, and the amount of meth we consume each year. I think voters will be feeling very cheated by the economy, with many experiencing a grim Christmas and a harsh cost of living summer. The decision by this government in early 2024 to smash Labour's infrastructure pipeline has seen 140,000 leave New Zealand in 2 years, which has caused cascade failures throughout the economy. Should Kiwis feel angry at this government's ideological economic experiment?
I think Kiwis are entitled to feel both angry and disappointed. You know, National said they were going to fix the economy and they made it worse. They said that 2025 was going to be the year of growth, and they managed to shrink the economy in the year of growth. They said that they were going to get people off the job seeker benefit and into work, and they've smashed jobs, and there's more people on the job seeker benefit now than when they started. They said that they were going to balance the government's books, and they've made the government's deficit bigger. They said that they were going to stop government borrowing, and they're borrowing more money than we ever did. I think Kiwis have got every right to feel like this government's completely out of touch and has broken all the promises they made them.
Bernard Hickey makes the point that the previous state cutbacks to deal with the 1990, 1997, 2007 and 2020 recessions only worked because the level of private debt and business debt was so low. However, it is far higher now, meaning households and businesses can't step in to pick up the cost of the cutbacks. There is a fundamental problem with the strategic thinking of this government when it comes to the economy, is there not? User pays doesn't work if the users can't pay.
Well, it's not just, I think, this government. It's those who believe in the sort of the new right neoliberalism, where, you know, you just shrink the size of the state and transfer all the debt onto households instead of the collective debt that we previously held as a government, that things will get better. I think we've reached the limits of that now. You can't actually transfer more debt onto households because if you look at the amount of money that households are borrowing, we're getting up to unsustainable debt levels, property prices, unsustainable property prices. This is not the way that we're going to grow our economy. We're not going to grow our economy by, you know, pumping up house prices even higher, mortgaging ourselves up even higher. That isn't a recipe for sustainable economic progress.
How good is Barbara Edmonds going to be up against Nicola Willis this year in the House?
I think Barbara Edmonds is going to be fantastic, and because she knows her stuff, you know, she's an expert in this, but also because she actually understands what it's like to raise 8 kids,
right?
And really kind of just has her feet firmly on the ground, embedded in local communities, and she gets what people are saying when they come to her and they say, look, we've got these cost of living issues that the government seem to be out of touch with. I think Barb gets that.
Yeah. I want to talk to you, Chris, tonight about the rising anti-immigrant sentiment we're seeing alongside the rise of New Zealand First. Over the weekend, we saw Bishop Brian Tamaki attempting to exploit anti-immigrant sentiment. We've seen Shane Jones jump on the bucket people issue at rock pools, and we saw New Zealand First attack the free trade deal with India. I want to put something to you. I know a 40-year-old Pākehā woman. She's a cleaner. She's been told by her boss that there is less work because migrant workers from India and Asia are undercutting their prices and they are losing contracts. I asked this woman who she was voting for, and she said New Zealand First because Winston will protect me from migrant workers taking my job. Her fears and economic anxiety are shared by many domestic working class workers when it comes to immigration. What would you say as the leader of the Labour Party to those who share her fears?
I think we've got to be really careful in the debate around immigration, that it doesn't just become xenophobic,
yes,
that we're dealing with legitimate concerns that people are raising about the level of population growth. How much population growth can we absorb as a country before our infrastructure gets strained?
Yes.
How many houses do we have? And we are really straining to cope with the population growth we've got at the moment. But I'd hate that to end up being an anti-migrant sentiment.
Right.
You go around rest homes around the country and you'll find migrant workers caring for some of our most vulnerable people.
Exactly.
Doing absolutely amazing work.
Yes.
And I just hate it when it all just gets generalised into an anti-migrant. The migrants are to blame for everything. There's a great cartoon that I absolutely love, and it's a really rich guy with this huge pile of cookies in front of him. And then there's another guy with one cookie, and he's pointing, and the rich guy's pointing at him saying, careful, that migrant wants to steal your cookie.
Right.
That's very much the territory we're in at the moment. Those in power, those with privilege, are saying it's all the migrants' fault.
Yes.
Never willing to look at themselves and the contribution that they're making to people's lives being more difficult.
Exactly. I have prepared tribunal cases where there have been egregious exploitation of migrant workers. It might say 20 hours in the contract to get the visa, but in many cases, migrant workers are worked many more hours with no pay. There is only one Labour inspectorate for every 3,000 migrant workers. Surely the solution here to ensure migrant workers aren't exploited and to support domestic workers so their wages don't fall is for every migrant worker joining a migrant worker union. Universal union membership for migrant workers would stamp out exploitation while ensuring domestic workers know the same conditions and wages are being protected. Why isn't universal migrant union membership being considered?
Well, I think, unions have a role to play here. Things like fair pay agreements can play a role because
Right.
it actually stops the race to the bottom. It stops employers undercutting each other by cutting the wages of their employees. Fair pay agreements would really prevent that from happening. Modern slavery, tackling modern slavery.
Right.
Despite the fact that during the leaders' debate in the last election, Christopher Luxon said he'd march in the streets over modern slavery, only now because two backbench MPs have got together from Labour and National.
Yes.
Are we actually finally going to have a debate in the House about it?
Yes.
Christopher Luxon's government have done nothing on modern slavery, even though he said that this was the greatest issue that was near and dear to his heart.
Last issue of this interview is the appalling impact of climate change versus the government's war on the environment. It seemed to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me when you were Prime Minister during Cyclone Gabriel that the enormity of the damage you saw had a really visceral effect on you, did it?
Absolutely. I came back and we sat around and I said to Grant Robertson, we're going to have to do something meaningful about this. We can't just keep responding to these events and pretending that these are one-off events. They're not one-off events anymore.
Yeah.
We need to be better prepared. We need to change the way we respond. We can't just lurch from emergency to emergency. We've actually got to get on top of this. I was heartbroken by what I saw after Cyclone Gabriel, but I was also heartbroken by what I saw after the anniversary weekend floods in Auckland. These aren't 1 in a 100-year events anymore. They're happening all of the time. So we set up the $6 billion fund,
Yes.
which was about building more resilience, and then National came into government and cut it, said that it was wasteful spending. Preparing communities for the fact that more extreme weather events are coming is not wasteful spending.
The right are always underplaying the reality of climate change. They promote climate denial. Some of the right-wing hate trolls were even trying to blame co-governance on the Mount Maunganui landslide, for crying out loud. Climate change is here. It is real. This government cut, as you said, your $6 billion climate defence fund. They are allowing fast-track mining, and they cut $25 million from civil defence last year. They even held up your natural disaster management plan because they don't like the co-governance language you used to empower marae as the front line, despite gushing over how wonderful the marae were once again in these latest storms. As far as National are concerned, the answer to every climate problem is more cows and less co-governance. What must we do about climate change now?
We've got to tackle our emissions. We've got to tackle the transition. We've got to realise that fossil fuels, despite Shane Jones basically blocking New Zealand signing up to a pathway away from fossil fuels, we've got to transition away from fossil fuels. We've got to be prepared for the fact that more extreme weather events are going to happen, and we've got to have better systems in place. And that means, Christopher Luxon was saying, isn't it great that marae were prepared for this? They were prepared because the last Labour government gave them a whole lot of resources to be better prepared.
Right.
And we did that after Cyclone Gabriel because I saw firsthand what an amazing role they had played, and they did it off the smell of an oily rag. And I said, we've got to get behind them and actually support them to do this. And now the government, despite the fact that they said that it was all wasteful spending at the time, they're now saying, isn't it great that Marae were prepared? That didn't happen by accident. It happened because we worked with them to make sure they were prepared.
Is New Zealand First's climate denial the biggest hurdle you have in maybe having any arrangement with them post-election?
Oh, climate denial, their attacks on the rainbow community, their attacks on migrants.
Pretty much everything, right? It's a platter. It's a buffet, isn't it?
There's a bit of a list,
Finally, Chris, your message to the whānau as we enter election 2026, please.
This election matters. All elections matter, but this one feels like it really matters. And my message to everyone is, look at the number of young New Zealanders giving up and leaving the country. Record numbers of young Kiwis giving up and leaving the country. We cannot go on like this. We've got to give those young people a future, a reason to stay here in New Zealand and make their lives here in New Zealand. National has no answers for that, so it's time to get rid of them.
Thank you, comrade. We will see you again soon on the show. Have a great weekend.
Good to talk.
Cheers, comrade.